This is Battletech Declassified, Modern Warfare, Explained. Can the United States still build a steam catapult? That sounds like a strange question. Steam is old technology. America has been throwing aircraft off carrier decks with steam since 1954. It is not exotic, it is not classified, and there are Nimitz-class carriers, running 4 of them, at sea tonight. Here is the problem. The last American carrier delivered with steam catapults was the USS George H.W. Bush, commissioned in 2009, 17 years ago. And no new set has been manufactured since. The Navy has not purchased one in more than 20 years. On August 13th, the President signed a national security memorandum directing the Navy to remove the electromagnetic launch system from future Ford-class carriers and put steam catapults back, starting with the USS Doris Miller. The Pentagon has 60 days to produce a plan. So the question is not whether steam works. It obviously works. The question is whether the country that invented this thing can still make one. And the answer sits in a space underneath the flight deck of a ship currently being built in Virginia, a space that was deliberately left empty. We do not count the kills. We count the bill. And this bill is going to be strange because it is the price of going backwards. Start with what a catapult actually has to do, because the number is genuinely difficult to picture. A fully loaded strike fighter weighs about 36 tons. That is roughly the weight of 2 loaded semi-trailers. To fly, it needs to be moving at about 140 knots, which is 160 miles an hour. A carrier deck does not give you a runway. It gives you about 90 meters. 90 meters is shorter than a football pitch. So the catapult has to take 2 loaded semi-trailers and get them from standing still to highway speed times 2 in the length of a football pitch, and then stop the machinery that did it before it destroys itself. Both systems in this story do exactly that. They just do it with almost nothing in common, and that is the entire reason you cannot swap one for the other. And there is one more constraint that shapes everything else. Whatever machine does this has to fit inside a ship, not beside it, not behind it. Inside the bow, underneath a deck that has aircraft moving on it, in volume that could otherwise hold fuel, ordnance, or people. Every cubic meter a launch system occupies is a cubic meter the carrier does not get to use for something else, and on a warship, that is the currency, everything is paid in. The steam catapult is a British invention. It was proposed by Commander Colin Mitchell of the Royal Navy Volunteer Reserve and trialed aboard HMS Perseus in 1950. The U.S. Navy fired its first steam shot from the USS Hancock in 1954, and the basic principle has not changed since. Here is how it works. The ship's reactor plant makes steam. Some of that steam is bled off and stored under pressure in accumulators sitting below the flight deck. When a launch is ordered, a valve opens, and that stored pressure slams into 2 parallel cylinders, each running the length of the catapult. Pistons inside those cylinders are connected to a shuttle on the deck above. The shuttle is connected to the aircraft, and the whole assembly is thrown forward. At the far end, a water break stops the pistons. The C-13 versions on the Nimitz-class are 99 meters long. That is a machine the length of a city block, buried inside the bow of a ship, and there are 4 of them. Now hold on to that description, because every part of it is about to become a problem. Steam has to be generated. It has to be piped across long distances at high pressure. It has to be stored in accumulators, which take up volume, and the water, the condensation, and the maintenance systems that keep it all running need their own spaces and their own people. The electromagnetic system does the same job with no steam at all. Instead of pressure driving a piston, it uses a linear induction motor. Think of the track itself as the engine. A series of electromagnets fire in sequence down the length of the catapult, and the shuttle rides that traveling magnetic wave. Nothing is bled from the reactor plant. Nothing is stored in an accumulator. The power comes from electricity, buffered and released. There is a second consequence that is easy to miss. A steam catapult is a pressure vessel with moving parts in it, and pressure vessels with moving parts need people. Sailors to run them, sailors to maintain them, sailors to fix the water and condensation plant that supports them. A launch system with no steam and no pistons needs fewer of all 3, and on a ship where every berth is contested, crew size is a design decision, not an afterthought. That difference produces one capability steam does not have, and it matters more than it sounds. Because the force is generated electrically, it can be metered precisely and adjusted throughout the stroke. A steam catapult delivers a violent shove. An electromagnetic catapult delivers a controlled push, dialed to the specific aircraft on the shuttle. The Ford class was built to exploit that. Its two A-1B reactors generate far more electrical capacity than the Nimitz-class, and across the ship, electricity does the work that steam, hydraulics, and mechanical machinery used to do. Which brings us back to that empty space. The Ford class was not a Nimitz with new catapults bolted in. It was designed from the beginning around electrification, and that design choice was made throughout the hull, not just under the flight deck. The electromagnetic launch system crosses 48 separate ship construction zones. 48. That is not a component. That is a network threaded through the structure of the ship, and it was drawn that way from the first sheet of steel. And when the designers put electricity in, they took something out. The high-pressure steam piping that a C-13 needs was reduced or eliminated. The accumulator volume was reduced or eliminated. The water and condensation plant, the maintenance spaces, the manning that goes with them, all of it was designed away, because the whole point was that the ship would not need it. So the Doris Miller, currently under construction at Newport News in Virginia, has a shape inside it that is wrong for steam, not missing a part, shaped wrong. Putting steam catapults into that hull means running high-pressure piping through a ship that was drawn without room for it, finding volume for accumulators in compartments already allocated to something else, and adding back a water and maintenance plant that the design deliberately removed. If the economics of modern warfare are your kind of rabbit hole, subscribe now. New long-form episodes every Wednesday, new Decoded episodes every Saturday. Now, before this sounds like a one-sided argument, the case against the electromagnetic system deserves to be made properly because it was real. For years, this system was a genuine problem. Reliability during the Ford's construction and early service was poor. The advanced weapons elevators, which are part of the same order, were worse and were delivered years late. The criticism that the ship was too complex, too new, and too many unproven systems at once was not manufactured. It was earned, and it was made loudly by people who were right at the time. What has changed is the record since. By March of this year, the Ford had logged 36,863 electromagnetic launches. In May, it came home to Norfolk from a deployment of 326 days, the longest by an American carrier since Vietnam. During that deployment, its air wing flew more than 5,700 hours and made roughly 12,200 launches. In February, a formal Navy test of sortie generation rate reported that the flight deck, the catapult, and the arresting gear together produced a higher rate than a Nimitz-class carrier, and that the systems were operating as designed. And France, choosing the launch system for the carrier that will replace the Charles de Gaulle, selected the American electromagnetic system. So both things are true. It was a troubled program for a decade, and it is now working, and an ally just bought it. That is worth stating clearly, because it is the crux of the disagreement. If you judge this system in 2019, the case against it was overwhelming. If you judge it on the last 2 years, it is a system that has thrown aircraft off a deck 36,000 times and come home from the longest deployment in half a century. Both of those judgments were made honestly. They were just made at different times, about a system that changed in between. Let us put the whole thing side by side, because at this point it is easy to lose track. The piping does not exist in the ship. The volume for the accumulators does not exist in the ship. The supply chain that built the last steam catapult does not exist anymore. And the workforce that knew how to build and install one has moved on, retired, or died. That is not a list of 4 problems. That is the same problem, asked 4 times. Every one of those items is a thing that used to exist, that somebody decided to stop maintaining, because at the time nobody expected to need it again. That is the pattern, and it is the reason this episode is not really about catapults. Here is where the honest answer stops being no, and becomes a number. Nothing in this story is physically impossible. Steam catapults are not lost technology. The drawings exist, the physics is 100 years old, and the Navy has decades of operating experience with them. If the United States decides to rebuild this capability, it can. The question is what that costs, how long it takes, and what gets given up to pay for it. Brian Clark, who runs the Hudson Institute's Center for Defense Concepts, put the industrial problem plainly. The Navy has not bought a steam catapult in more than 20 years, so it is unlikely the suppliers can build them without substantial upfront investment and time to establish the production lines. Others have been blunter still. The tooling and the skilled labor have evaporated, and reconstituting them means spending years and billions to rebuild an obsolete supply chain from scratch, recreating manufacturing tools that were state-of-the-art in the 1970s. Read that again because it is the strangest sentence in modern American defense. To go backwards, you have to build a factory for the past. And the schedule has no slack in it. The Doris Miller is already under construction and is expected in service around 2034. The ship before her, the Kennedy, has already slipped nearly 3 years. Redesigning a hull that is being welded together right now is not a paperwork exercise, and the memorandum this came in is not only about catapults. It is titled Rebuilding the United States Navy and America's Shipbuilding Industrial Base, and it also orders work on a 5th public shipyard near the Pacific Fleet, up to 3 additional submarine dry docks, a new repair center for spare parts, and greater use of foreign yards to build warships while transferring production techniques back to American shipbuilders. The same document criticizes iterative design changes as a cause of cost growth and delay, which is worth sitting with, given that the catapult order is itself an iterative design change to a ship already under construction. There is a second cost, and it is the one almost nobody in the coverage raised. Remember the one thing the electromagnetic system does that steam cannot. It meters the force precisely, dialed to the aircraft on the shuttle. That is not a luxury feature. It is the reason the Ford class can launch things a Nimitz cannot. A steam catapult delivers a violent shove calibrated for a 36-ton fighter. Point that at a light, fragile, uncrewed airframe and you do not launch it. You tear the nose gear off it. Now look at where carrier aviation is going. Every serious plan for the American Air Wing over the next 2 decades involves crewed fighters flying alongside cheaper, uncrewed aircraft. Those aircraft are, by design, lighter and more delicate than an F-18. The precise control that steam does not have is the specific capability the next air wing depends on. So, the decision is not only about the cost of going back, it is about whether the ship that enters service in 2034 can fly the air wing of 2040. This is Decoded, the series that breaks down the real cost behind the systems everyone else just calls impressive. New episode every Saturday. Here is what this story actually is, and it is a pattern we have now traced through 3 episodes. With the Patriot Interceptor, we found that one factory in Alabama gates the seeker for the entire Western air defense stockpile, and money cannot make it produce faster. With the F-22, we found that America stopped building the best air superiority fighter ever made, and a declassified study put the cost of restarting production at nearly $10 billion, most of it just to redesign parts nobody manufactures anymore. This is the third variation, and it is the strangest, because it runs in the other direction. Patriot and the F-22 are stories about losing the ability to build the advanced thing. This is a story about losing the ability to build the simple thing. Nobody decided to destroy the steam catapult industry. There was no vote. The Navy stopped ordering them. And about 20 years later, the suppliers were gone, the tooling was gone, and the people were gone. That is what an industrial base actually is, not a set of factories, a set of ongoing relationships that only exist while somebody keeps paying for them, and it decays quietly. A closed factory makes headlines. A supplier who stops bidding because the orders dried up does not. Nobody sends a notice saying the last person who knew how to machine a particular component has retired. You find out years later when you ask for a quote and discover there is nobody left to give you one. So, can America still build a steam catapult? Probably yes. Eventually, for a price that nobody has published, and on a schedule that nobody has committed to. 60 days for a plan. 120 days for a wider report on carrier and submarine readiness. The real numbers come after that. We do not worship the machine. We count what it costs to keep the ability to make one. And the uncomfortable finding in this episode is that the ability is the expensive part, not the machine. The Ford's launch system took 2 decades and a fortune to make work, and it now works. The steam catapult already worked for 55 years, and America let the capacity to build it quietly disappear while nobody was looking. Which leaves the question that the 60-day plan is going to have to answer. If it costs years and billions to rebuild a supply chain for a machine invented in 1950, what is the honest price of every other capability America has quietly stopped ordering? And how many of those does anyone actually have a list of? If you think this is the right call, type STEAM in the comments. If you think it is not, type electric and subscribe, because the next episode goes somewhere just as expensive. This has been BattleTech Declassified, made to listen. No screen required.